What's going on? YouTube? Listen up, young elder gang. This is Dr. Shalonda Williams at you with another banger. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video, fam. I hope this video get at least 100,000 likes in this video. You will find history definitions, scripture information, and best of all, what we Americans have been deprived of from the beginning. The truth, keep in mind. This content used in this video is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. We will give you the total truth as we best understand it today. Be sure to hit that like button. Young Elder Gang, hit that subscribe button. If you're new to the channel, hit that bell, and don't forget to check back with us every day for new content. In this video, we will use the word black out of context. The statement, "the word black is not a nationality," is correct. Black is a term for a racial group, while nationality refers to citizenship in a specific country. Picture a line drawn through your life, told where you can go, who you can love, all because of science. Sounds wild? Welcome to America's past. Here's the ugly truth. America's racial divide was built brick by brick with the help of fake science. Eugenicists, real smooth-talking frauds, claimed white people were naturally superior. They measured skulls, scribbled charts, and called it evidence. Their bogus theories fueled laws that split schools, neighborhoods, even families, locking black folks out of opportunity, dignity, and safety. This wasn't just some fringe belief. Universities taught it, courts quoted it. In Virginia, they even sterilized people, ripping away futures on a racist whim. And when Brown v. Board of Education tried to break the cycle, segregationists clung to their so-called science, desperate to keep power. Those lies echo today in wealth gaps, biased systems, and debates about who belongs. So, next time you hear science used to separate or dehumanize, remember, truth matters. Speak up, push back, because the legacy of pseudoscience is all around us, and only we can break the cycle. The science of segregation refers to the pseudoscience and flawed scientific theories used to justify racial segregation and inequality, particularly in the United States. Proponents of this science, such as the eugenics movement, promoted the idea that racial groups had inherent biological differences, with non-white groups being inferior. These claims were used to support discriminatory laws and social policies, including those mandating racial separation in schools and public spaces, despite being based on ideological bias and flawed research, as seen in works like Science for Segregation. Proponents of eugenics believed in the concept of racial improvement through selective breeding. They argued for racial purity and opposed interracial relationships, often promoting sterilization and marriage restrictions to prevent the weakening of the white race. These theories falsely claimed that racial differences in intelligence, morality, and physical health were determined by inherent biological traits, rather than by social, economic, or environmental factors. Early forms of this science involved measurements of skulls and head shapes to assert racial hierarchy and establish supposed intellectual differences between races. This pseudo-scientific reasoning was used to create and justify discriminatory policies, such as forced segregation in schools, which was seen as necessary to prevent the perceived contamination of the white race and maintain social order. Before the Brown v. Board of Education decision, segregationist scientists and institutions argued that racial mixing was dangerous and that segregation was supported by scientific evidence. In Virginia, eugenic theories were taught in schools and medical institutions and influenced the passage of laws mandating sterilization and restricting marriage between races, targeting Native Americans who had been reclassified as blacks, Negroes, and colored, then late turned into African Americans. Even after the landmark Brown ruling against school segregation, some scientists tried to mount legal challenges based on their flawed racial science, although these efforts ultimately failed. These segregationist scientific claims were later discredited and exposed as ideological rather than objective science, often by the very social science research used by the Supreme Court in cases like Brown v. Board of Education. Despite being disproven, the arguments of the science of segregation have left a lasting legacy, with similar racist ideas resurfacing in other contexts, as noted in works like The Bell Curve and in contemporary debates about race and intelligence. Imagine a world split not by geography, but by invisible lines, lines that divided towns, cities, and even hearts. This was the American South under Jim Crow, where skin color dictated your reality. For African Americans, life meant constant negotiation with these invisible walls. Crossing a line, even by accident, could cost you everything. The rules were everywhere, unspoken but always understood. Signs reading whites only or colored hammered the division deeper. Parks, theaters, buses, every space was engineered to enforce separation, a constant reminder that your comfort, dignity, and humanity didn't matter. Every ordinary place became a battleground for dignity. This was the reality of Jim Crow's shadow. How could such cruelty be justified? Through a dark twist of science, segregationists built their arguments on pseudoscience, claiming white supremacy as biological fact. They measured skulls, invented theories of blood purity, and declared African Americans inferior. These ideas weren't fringe. They were taught in universities and published as fact. This science gave Jim Crow a veneer of respectability, making prejudice seem logical. If one race was naturally inferior, separation was called a kindness. But the facilities were never equal. Black schools and hospitals were neglected and underfunded. This lie poisoned a nation, rationalizing every cruelty of Jim Crow. The consequences would last for generations. The name Jim Crow didn't come from lawmakers. It came from a song. In the 1830s, a white performer in blackface created the character Jim Crow, mocking and dehumanizing black people. The act became wildly popular, spreading racist stereotypes through minstrel shows. These shows taught white audiences to see black people as caricatures, not humans. When Southern states passed segregation laws, the name Jim Crow stuck. The laws trapped black Americans in second-class citizenship. Minstrel shows were propaganda, making hatred seem like harmless fun. The name itself was a bitter reminder of the mockery at the system's heart. Jim Crow laws weren't just about bodies. They controlled minds and stories. A joke became law, shaping millions of lives. The power of a hateful story became the power of the state. Living under Jim Crow meant constant fear and rigid rules. A simple trip to town was a minefield. One wrong move could mean violence or worse. Schools for black children were separate and never equal. Crumbling buildings, outdated books, underpaid teachers. This was deliberate, designed to keep black families trapped in poverty. The right to vote was systematically denied through poll taxes and impossible literacy tests. These barriers silenced black voices for decades. Economic oppression was relentless. Most black Southerners were sharecroppers, trapped in cycles of debt. Landlords controlled the books, ensuring escape was nearly impossible. It was a system just one step removed from slavery. Jim Crow kept black families poor, powerless, and dependent. Every aspect of life was shaped by these invisible lines. The system stole futures and silenced hope. This was life on the other side of the line. Jim Crow eventually began to collapse under its own injustice. In 1954, Brown v. Board of Education struck down separate but equal. The civil rights movement rose. Marches, protests, and courage forced the nation to confront its prejudice. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Voting Rights Act of 1965 dismantled legal segregation. But like a dying star, Jim Crow's shadow lingers. The false ideas about race didn't vanish overnight. They echo in disparities in wealth, housing, healthcare, and justice. The old lies still whisper in modern society. The fight against Jim Crow was a fight against a lie dressed as science. It reminds us, ideas have consequences, and science without humanity can be monstrous. The struggle for justice is never over. The shadows of Jim Crow are long. It's up to us to keep pushing them back and build a world judged by character, not color. White supremacy is a racist ideology and a systemic form of oppression based on the belief that white people are superior to people of other races. It is not limited to extremist hate groups, but also describes a political and socio-economic system that maintains white domination through institutional power, resources, and culture. The core beliefs of white supremacy are based on the purported superiority of white people. These beliefs are propagated in several forms. The pseudoscientific belief that white people are biologically and genetically superior to other racial and ethnic groups. The claim that a distinct white culture is superior to all others and that white people should dominate politically, economically, and socially. The desire for white people to live in a whites-only society, with more extreme forms advocating for the exclusion or eradication of non-white people. The belief that white people are entitled to control power and material resources. In addition to extremist views, the term white supremacy is used in academic and anti-racist contexts to describe the societal structures that benefit white people at the expense of others. This systemic form is not about individual feelings of hatred, but about institutions and policies that perpetuate racial inequity. Practices like redlining, where loans were denied to black families and approved for white families, created residential segregation and a racial wealth gap that persists today. Immigration. The Naturalization Act of 1790 explicitly limited citizenship to free white persons and was followed by other race-conscious laws restricting immigration for non-Europeans. Disproportionate incarceration rates and police violence against black people reflect policies that are rooted in white supremacy. Education. Persistent disparities in school funding and the silencing of minority students are manifestations of white supremacy within school systems. The media has historically reinforced white dominance by excluding and negatively characterizing non-white people, setting whiteness as the cultural norm. Racism versus white supremacy. While racism is the belief in a racial hierarchy, many scholars and activists use white supremacy to emphasize that this belief is institutionalized and creates systemic advantages for white people. The unearned advantages and immunities that white people experience daily due to their race. It operates regardless of conscious prejudice and helps maintain the racial hierarchy. When white people face racial stress, they may become defensive, triggering emotions and behaviors that reinstate white racial equilibrium and avoid confronting systemic racism. The ways in which people, including people of color and white people, are damaged by upholding the values and preferences of white culture as the standard. White nationalism is a more radical ideology that uses white supremacist beliefs to justify its political agenda. White supremacists have historically used legal and socioeconomic systems to ensure white dominance. White nationalists go further, seeking to create an exclusive white ethno-state and remove non-white people from society, sometimes advocating for genocidal tactics. Jim Crow laws led to widespread prosperity for black-owned businesses. The effect on major so-called white businesses was negligible in the short term, but increasingly significant over time, and whites begin to get mad that so-called blacks weren't spending their money with so-called good white folks, sparking a violent and discriminatory backlash on the creator of the Jim Crow law. In reality, black entrepreneurship under Jim Crow was a story of resilience built within a segregated secondary economy, not a direct challenge to the white-dominated corporate world. More so-called black businesses form under Jim Crow law than ever. Historically, black-owned businesses operated within a parallel economy due to Jim Crow segregation. White-owned businesses often refuse service to black customers, creating a captive consumer base for black entrepreneurs within their own communities. This growth was not a voluntary choice to do better, but a response to being shut out of the mainstream white economy. Black-owned businesses included everything from grocery stores and banks to insurance companies and funeral homes, fulfilling needs that big, white-owned businesses denied the black community. Black Wall Street as a model. Thriving business districts like Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, became known as Black Wall Street and showcased the heights of economic development that were possible. If this success were to have occurred on a much larger, more robust scale, it would likely have unfolded in several stages, which is why the government had to stop it. Black entrepreneurship was primarily focused on small, community-based businesses and services. They were on their way to large-scale manufacturing, technology, or finance that would have competed directly with white corporate giants. Major businesses would have viewed this as a separate market, largely irrelevant to their bottom line. As black-owned businesses continued to grow, they would eventually have started to compete with major businesses for market share, labor, and capital. This would have forced a response from the white-dominated corporate world. Large retail and department store chains would have seen sales erode in black neighborhoods. Corporations would face competition for skilled black labor, potentially forcing them to offer better wages or working conditions to attract employees. The development of a stronger black financial sector, including more black-owned banks, would challenge the monopoly of white financial institutions and allow for larger-scale black-led investment. Any significant economic progress by black communities during the Jim Crow era was met with violent white backlash and discriminatory government action. A hypothetical scenario of booming black business would almost certainly have provoked a strong negative reaction. As with the historical Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921, Mobs could target and destroy successful black business districts out of racial jealousy and a desire to maintain the racial hierarchy. Urban renewal projects in the 1950s and 60s, often funded by the federal government, built highways and other infrastructure that intentionally demolished thriving black commercial centers and displaced residents. This shows how systemic power was used to undermine black economic success. Big business interests would likely have lobbied for new laws or increased enforcement of existing regulations to limit the growth and economic reach of black-owned businesses. Black businesses under Jim Crow would have exposed and potentially undermined a core tenet of the white-dominated economy at the time. White big business benefited from a system that provided cheap black labor, limited black consumer purchasing power, and restricted black-owned businesses to secondary markets. The systemic success of black businesses would challenge this entire structure. Economic studies suggest that removing systemic racial barriers expands the overall economy rather than simply transferring wealth from one group to another. So, a thriving black business sector would have made the entire American economy larger and more robust. In this hypothetical scenario, the white business community would have had to adapt to a new, more competitive marketplace rather than operating with an artificial advantage. The Montgomery Bus Boycott was leading to the creation of a black-owned bus station. It would have been a significant economic and social victory, forcing major white-owned bus businesses out of business due to a significant loss of revenue and demonstrating the power of community-led initiatives in dismantling segregation. The boycott's success in ending racial segregation on public transit through a Supreme Court ruling could have also inspired other black-owned businesses to emerge. The success of a black-owned bus station would have directly impacted white-owned bus companies by reducing their customer base, leading to substantial financial losses and potentially putting them out of business. This would have fostered black economic empowerment, creating opportunities and strengthening the community by keeping money within the black community. Such a venture would have demonstrated that black communities could effectively create their own infrastructure and businesses, thereby challenging the existing economic power structures. The success of the boycott in desegregating buses provided a powerful precedent that could be extended to other public transit facilities and systems. By organizing and creating their own infrastructure, the black community could have gained more political clout, further advancing their fight for civil rights. A successful black-owned bus station would serve as a powerful symbol of the black community's resilience and ability to overcome injustice, inspiring similar efforts in other parts of the nation. The success of this endeavor could have inspired the establishment of other black-owned businesses such as taxi services, carpools, and other forms of transportation, further diversifying the economic landscape and providing more employment opportunities for the black community. Black people's power in boycotting comes from their collective, substantial, and targeted economic influence. By withholding their collective purchasing power, estimated at nearly $2 trillion in 2025, a unified boycott could exert significant pressure on businesses and drive systemic changes. This power can be categorized into economic, reputational, and social pressure, as demonstrated by historical movements like the Montgomery Bus Boycott. Significant spending reduction. With black consumer buying power projected to reach approximately $1.98 trillion in 2025, a large-scale, coordinated boycott could cause major short-term revenue losses for targeted businesses. Forced policy change. When boycotts cause major financial disruption, companies are forced to alter their behavior and policies to cut their losses. In the 1963 Birmingham campaign, boycotts inflicted millions of dollars in losses on local businesses, pressuring owners to support desegregation and influence local officials. Boycotts can redirect spending to local black-owned businesses, boosting economic self-sufficiency and fostering community development. A hypothetical shift to supporting black entrepreneurs could strengthen local economies and create more opportunities within the community. The significant and growing black consumer base gives the community an outsized influence on market trends and product development. By boycotting, black consumers can signal that their buying decisions are based on a company's social responsibility. A boycott's true impact is often less about immediate sales drops and more about damaging a company's public image. Publicizing a boycott can create negative media attention, shifting public opinion, and potentially causing a broader backlash against the targeted corporation. A well-organized boycott that draws national media attention can activate support from outside the Black community. A boycott that gains broad support among all consumers concerned about an issue such as DEI rollbacks would be far more effective. Research suggests that companies with poor public images and frequent scandals are more vulnerable to boycotts. A boycott forces companies to consider how their policies and actions are perceived by the public and how they align with corporate social responsibility efforts. As seen during the civil rights movement, boycotts can be used to influence political reform, which is a protected First Amendment activity. In Birmingham, pressure from businesses harmed by the boycott contributed to the city's desegregation, raising awareness. Even if a boycott doesn't severely damage a company's revenue, its power can lie in generating awareness for an issue and mobilizing collective action. This increased visibility and discussion can create momentum for broader policy changes. The effectiveness of Black boycotts has been demonstrated repeatedly throughout history, from the Don't Buy Where You Can't Work campaigns of the 1930s to the Montgomery Bus Boycott. This history of success provides a powerful roadmap and psychological motivation for future collective action. While a boycott offers considerable power, its effectiveness can be limited by several challenges. If a boycott encourages purchasing only from Black-owned businesses, it could harm the many Black and minority employees working for larger retailers. Additionally, Black-owned businesses may struggle with the scale required to absorb all the redirected spending, leading to potential price increases that disproportionately affect financially fragile Black households. Maintaining widespread participation over a long period is difficult due to economic pressures. Lower-income individuals may not have the luxury of making financial sacrifices for a cause and may be limited to more accessible or affordable options like large retailers. Corporate responses. Companies have resources to weather short-term financial losses. If they are willing to outlast a boycott, the movement could fail to achieve its goals.